Inferences. Onland would not admit it, but she was nervous. She had been before the Seer Council dozens of times, but never before with a matter of this importance. She still managed to keep her composure, but she was trying hard to keep her emotions and thoughts under control. "Stop worrying, Onland," she mentally scolded herself. "You are an accomplished seer of the line of Alinea. Yes, this prophecy is important, but there's no need to go about worrying over it like some pony." Onland shook her head and kept walking, her hooves making no sound as she moved through the forest. Up ahead, hidden by a large thicket, she could see a glowing light, and she could hear a faint hum permeating through her mind as she walked. She stepped through the clearing and stopped just outside a ring of pale stones. Inside the ring sat 5 deer, a mix of bucks and does, all dressed in ornate green robes with swirling gold patterns, each one unique to the clan the seer represented. In the center of the group was another doe, this one dressed in black and gold robes and held aloft by her magic. Small lights and stone fragments flitted around Onland and the seers, and Onland's fur stood on end as the magic of the clearing surrounded her. She said nothing at first, instead kneeling and looking to the ground, doing her best to avoid looking up at the seers until asked. "Arise, child," the deer in the center of the circle said, her voice echoing through Onland's mind. When Onland stood, the deer continued to speak. "You have found evidence to support your vision." "Yes," Onland said. "The 5 pedestals that I saw in my vision were like the 5 I discovered in the ruins of Everfree. They were bare. You know of equestrian myth and how they claimed their gods ruled them from Everfree. Sometimes myths are clearer than reality," one of the other deer said. "Are you so certain that Equestria's gods do not walk among them? Gods cannot manifest themselves in reality." Onland countered, perhaps a bit too curtly than she would have liked. "I find it hard to believe that the equestrian gods could have achieved what ours could not. Before this devolves into an argument over the powers of the Empyrean," a third deer said. "Please continue with your findings, young Onland." "Of course. The prophecy states that the lost would return once the pedestals were empty, and with it would come destruction." "And the lost?" the second deer asked. "What is it?" I do not know." Onland closed her eyes and bowed her head. "That part of my vision was unclear." "Such visions usually are," the first seer said. "Whatever is meant by destruction cannot bode well for our kin or the rest of the world. Until the nature of the lost is confirmed, the best we can do is prepare for the worst. Should we not try to alert those around us to the coming threat?" a doe by the name of Chanthal asked. "It would be like you to have a bleeding heart," Chanthal a buck countered. "What need do we have for the others? Griffins would try and enslave us, minotaurs and diamond dogs would try to commit genocide, and ponies would exploit us and try to seduce us with their offers of friendship. As the rest of the world burns, we shall persevere. Both options are extreme and would draw too much attention," the first seer said. "While they may be beneath us, we still need the outsiders and they still need us. And while alerting them might save them from destruction, it would eventually lead to conflict between us and them. Worse, it might accelerate the coming of destruction." "How so?" Onland asked. "I may be young, but I am still a seer of deer and a leader of our kin. War is brewing between the Griffin kingdoms and Equestria. The king of Griffins has pressed against the borders of Germain and the equestrian outposts, but he is old and stands on a blade's edge. His generals await his decision on an heir, and are willing to kill for that position. How does that affect us? Think for a moment, young one, and the answer shall be revealed." Chanthal said. Onland thought for a moment, running multiple scenarios through her mind. All of them ended with Equestria and the Griffin kingdoms at war, or a civil war destroying the Griffins, or the Roe clans have enclaves in the Black Forest of Germain, she said, looking up to the seers. A civil war in the Griffin kingdoms could spill over and put them in danger. "An important consideration, young one," the first seer said. "It is our duty to protect our brothers and sisters, and a conflict with rogue griffins would prove devastating to their work. What can we do? I have done my best to keep the Griffin King focused on Equestria, as the ponies are a ways away from the Roe enclaves," another doe said. "His mind is weak, much weaker than the ruler of Equestria, but I feel a dark power residing in the recesses of his soul. Given time, I can root out this power, but it has not acted upon my suggestions. And my rangers have been harrying several griffin forces near the equestrian border," the buck who had spoken against Chanthal said. "It is a bit more blunt than I would like, but the griffins do not suspect that we are involved." "And the roe?" Onland asked. "They can survive and hide from incursions, for a while," the first seer said. "If necessary, several detachments of guardians and rangers can be supplied to defend or evacuate them if no other option presents itself." "What of the lost?" "Until our position is secured, you will focus on divining the identity of the lost. You have great potential, child, and it would be a waste if we tried to limit it. Go in peace, Onland of Alinea, and may the gods bless you." Sight. Onland bowed and turned, stepping out of the clearing and back into the woods. She would have used her runes to teleport back to her home, but that would be a waste of resources and against her vows as a seer. So she walked on, drifting through the forest like a spectre, invisible to all but the most well-trained eyes. After a few minutes of walking, she spotted Galas standing beneath one of the larger trees. While the ranger's dedication to her was admirable, at times it felt like she was being followed around by a small puppy or younger sibling. Endearment could easily turn into annoyance if their persistence carried on. "Watching my path again, Galas?" she asked. "Dark times call for vigilance, my lady," he replied. "Even with your power, you are still one, dear. You sound like my father, always worrying about me," Onland said, rolling her eyes as she kept walking, the ranger following close behind. "Although, I might need your help." "How so?" "The Seer Council instructed me to discover the identity of the lost. I would use my normal quarters for divination, but with a matter such as this I think I shall require more power." "I am no seer, my lady. How would I be of use? I plan to move to several locations where there are powerful magics, several of which are in griffin or pony territory. I will need an escort in the event that I am discovered." "Why? You were the one who said I worried too much." "I need to concentrate, Galas. You must make sure that no harm comes to me, or else I will not find anything. And you'll be dead." Onland scowled, but she knew that Galas was right to a degree. While ponies would most likely keep her imprisoned, the griffins or minotaurs would not hesitate on killing her, or worse torture her in an attempt to find the location of her kin. But for now, she set aside those thoughts and kept walking. "I need to gather my armor and weapons. After that, we shall head for the first location in Equestria." Luna's frustration for both Equestria and herself had mounted considerably. She knew it was rather frivolous to be frustrated, but the depths to which Equestria had sunk since she had been banished. "Maybe I'm just not approaching this from the right angle," she said, setting aside another manual for these gaming devices that had been developed in the past few years. "I should not just turn against everything that has been developed since my banishment, but at the very least, could they have developed something a bit more practical?" She sighed, closing her eyes and clearing her thoughts. She considered going to find her sister for help, but Luna knew she could not use Celestia as a crutch. The other option was finding a way to contact Horus, but that brought her to her next problem. Ever since she had been freed, her magic had been comparable to that of a young foal. Basic telekinesis she could manage, but shields, combat spells, even illumination were beyond her capabilities. Finding one soul amongst the tides of the warp, even one as powerful as Horus, might take time and energy that she did not have. Then again, it was always worth the try, so she closed her eyes and tried to open her soul to the warp. Luna grimaced as the eddies of the warp tossed her out, the psychic backlash digging into her mind and giving her a small headache. She composed herself and tried again, only to meet with failure once more. Her headache building along with her frustration, she tried every single technique Celestia had taught her about dealing with the warp, but to no avail. Eventually the pain in her head got too intense for her, and with a sigh of defeat she called her soul back to her body. "Spend 1,000 years in the warp and I cannot even get back in," she muttered. "Perhaps you should rely more on your patience than brute force," a voice whispered in the back of her mind, causing Luna to blink in surprise. "Horus? Is that you? I did say I would contact you if I could," the fallen Primarch replied. "And to be fair, your attempts at re-entering the warp were like someone firing an autocannon in a crowded room. That's bad, isn't it?" Horus did not respond, but Luna could tell that he was agreeing with her. I just feel so helpless right now. I can't access the warp, I know next to nothing about how Equestria works, I can't even connect with my soldiers on any meaningful level. How does Celestia expect me to achieve anything if I'm like this? The Imperium was not built in a day, Luna, you have just started to recover from a great deal of trauma and psychic exhaustion, and you cannot rush such recovery without risking hurting yourself or those around you. But I spent 1,000 years in the warp, if anything, my powers should be even greater than before. Normally I would agree with you, but I believe that your sister's use of the elements might have caused a psychic block of sorts to form within your mind. I can help you break it down, but understand that it will take some time. How long? A few months, a year? I cannot say at this time. You mean I'm going to be stuck with all the powers of a young foal for a year? I never said that. Your spells and abilities would re-emerge in due time, but returning to the levels of power that you had before your fall will not happen overnight. I suppose that's understandable. Luna sighed and fluffed her wings. What must I do until then? Meditate a few times a day, and find somewhere private where you can practice. I shall contact you and help you rebuild your strength, as well as teach you a few techniques one of my fellow primarchs developed. Thank you. There was a pause before Luna continued on. Horus, are you still there? Something else is on your mind? Yes. How can I connect with my soldiers? Another pause. Luna, you are an intelligent pony, you don't need to ask me. But I've missed so much. And how am I supposed to assist with that? I have been dead for longer than you have been alive, and you are the only benevolent being that I have had the chance to interact with in that time. I am just as out of touch with the mortal realm in terms of socialization and relationships as you are. But you're my friend, that has to count for something. I suppose so. Have you considered speaking with them? I have, but it did not go so well. Perhaps you approached it from the wrong angle. Try to make a connection with some of your soldiers, find out their interests and personalities. But, wouldn't developing such connections make me more likely to hold back in an attempt to keep them alive? They understand the risk, why else would they be here? You are a strong pony, Luna, and I know you will be able to make a clear decision should the time come. There was a pause. I can always act as your mentor in matters such as these. I would like that, thank you. Then I shall return later, and we shall discuss your training. Luna felt a shiver run down her spine as Horus left her mind. She stood, using what magic she could to brush away the objects of study and clear the floor. I suppose just talking to them would not hurt, although I should find the forge and get started with my armor before I can approach them on an even level. Just go to the throne room, the forge is at the far end of the first hall. Celestia's voice echoed through Luna's mind. Tia, were you eavesdropping on me? I am many things, Luna, needlessly intrusive is not one of them. Horus is technically my son, and I trust him enough to know that he won't do anything to hurt or otherwise hinder you. But how did you know I had finished speaking with Horus? I'm the most powerful psyker in the known universe? Fair enough. Luna was surprised that the forge was so close to Celestia's throne. She assumed that her sister would want it somewhere else, maybe closer to the barracks, so that no curious ponies would wander in and break something. Well, times have changed, I guess. She stepped through the threshold and was greeted with the smell of coal. Her nose tingled slightly, still getting used to the sensations of the material realm, but she pressed on regardless. The room itself was surprisingly bright, the source being a large fire on the far side of the room, and the light allowed Luna to survey the room much easier than if it had been dark. Near a small door on the left side of the room were several crates filled with supplies, including multiple types of metal and a spare anvil or two, while near the flames was a large rack of smith's tools and unfinished weapons. Luna's ears twitched as a pony opened the door and entered the room. He was an older unicorn, his coat darkened after years of work in the forge, but he still gave Luna a warm smile when he saw her. Princess Luna, he said, giving her a small nod. It is an honor to finally meet you. The honor is mine. Luna said, returning the nod. I require the use of the forge, I would like to craft myself a new suit of armor and some weapons. You don't have to ask my permission, princess. The forge is yours. Although, he moved to the other side of the room and pulled out a small box. For one such as you, I believe something special is in order. The smith brought the box over to Luna and opened it. Inside were 6 bars of silver metal, sparkling slightly from the light of the forge. Luna gave the metal a small poke with her hoof, finding that it was fairly dense. Adamantium, the unicorn explained, causing Luna to raise an eyebrow in surprise. Celestia herself discovered these samples some 200 years ago, give or take. My predecessors and I have kept it under our watch, in case some pony tried to steal it. Have you ever worked with it before? No, the smith chuckled. I've been tempted, but Celestia wanted us to guard it for a reason, far be it for me to go against her word. Luna blinked twice before the realization hit her. Thank you for this gift, Tia. Do you have any records of adamantium being used before? Only from Celestia's personal notes, and those are a bit worn. The smith re-entered the side room, and Luna could hear him rummaging around for a moment before he returned with a few old pieces of parchment. If you need any assistance, I will be here. Luna nodded her thanks before taking the parchment in her telekinesis and inspecting it. The pieces were torn in several places, and the ink had faded almost into illegibility, but Luna could still pick out a few important details. She took the parchment and the adamantium over to the forge, searching around for several other heavy metals and a hammer and running over her plan in her mind. Tia's writing is a bit curt, she thought. But there is enough here for me to work with. Reaching out with her magic once more, she gave the hammer a few practice swings, testing its weight and strength. That task complete, she gathered her materials and set to work, slowly combining the materials according to Celestia's instructions and crafting her armor in her own image. Working the metal was an arduous task. The adamantium did not react well with some of the other metals, and Luna had to be extra careful to not ruin the armor. Each strike of her hammer sent cascades of sparks flying, her armor slowly taking shape as she continued her labors. She would have built a suit of armor similar to what her sister possessed, but something stopped her. She looked to her armor and back to the unsmithed metal, then gave a small sigh as she changed the design to be more like that of Horus. A small line of sweat had formed on her brow as she worked, and her already weakened powers had begun to wane as the suit began to take shape. This armor shall herald a new era for myself, she thought. No longer shall I be shackled by the past. Now, I step forward into the future. Now, I step into the light. Slighthoof had set up a few sparring sessions, just to keep his available soldiers sharp. Due to rotations, injuries, and general leave, that left him with Echo, the twins, of which only Shadetail was present, a few other Justicars, and about a dozen acolytes. After a brief round of calisthenics, the Night Guard's ponies had broken up into rotating pairs, taking turns to attack and defend from their opponent while Slighthoof watched. Now, he said, kneeling to be at eye level with an acolyte currently caught in a headlock by Midnight Glimmer. What have we learned? That bat ponies don't like being complimented on their looks, the pinned acolyte said. He said I had huge flanks. Midnight Glimmer said, more of a complaint than a statement. I know, I was here. Slighthoof looked to the other acolyte. But no, what you got wrong was assuming that witty banter was a valid tactic. The enemy will most likely be too focused on killing you to hear your attempts to undermine them. He looked back to Midnight Glimmer. And you need to get some thicker skin. While they might not say much in combat, cult leaders love to try and make last-minute conversions by playing on your insecurities. Yes sir. Good. Reset and continue sparring. Midnight Glimmer released the other acolyte as Slighthoof moved further down the line. He did not have to go very far before another acolyte was hurled over his head, the unicorn landing in a heap a few feet away. Slighthoof turned and saw a massive Justicar standing nearby, the stallion looking fairly nonplussed about the situation. Shadetail, you do realize this is a sparring session, right? Yes, the Justicar replied, not showing much in the way of emotion. And tossing around acolytes like they're rag dolls improves our effectiveness. How? Strength. Slighthoof frowned. I presume you mean them being able to take something like that. Yes. Pull your strikes next time, please, I don't want to report to the Grand Master that you broke some pony in half. Yes. Slighthoof continued on before his horn began to pick up a build-up of magic. He stopped in an empty part of the room before there was a loud bang, a skinny unicorn with a wild mane dropping out of the sky right in front of the force commander. The unicorn took a moment to collect himself before turning to Slighthoof. Hey boss, he chirped. What's new? You're late to the sparring sessions, Sparks, again. Am I now? Sparks rubbed the back of his head. Well, that makes sense, what with all the ponies around here beating each other up. I was going to come down but I was running this new teleportation experiment upstairs and I didn't want to get distracted and blow something up, because that would be bad and Commander Shining Armor's still mad at me for things. And I think I'm getting closer. Closer to what? Mass teleportation, that's what. Sparks beamed before noting Slighthoof's lack of enthusiasm. Okay, so I've had this theory that you can teleport as many ponies as you want as far as you want, just as long as you have enough unicorns or magic to get you from point A to point B. Now, a normal or slightly better than average pony like me could probably teleport, say, 3 others about a mile or so away, granted they know how to cast a teleportation spell. So, in theory, if you have 2 ponies cast the same teleportation spell at the same time, syncing up everything, then you should be able to teleport either twice the number of ponies or go twice the distance. And you'd get even better range if you have a really powerful unicorn like the princess or someone. And you didn't see the disadvantage of bringing a whole bunch of unicorns for longer trips, not to mention the supplies needed for them? It would be a logistical nightmare. There was a pause. I'll check my notes later. Maybe something mechanical to act as a teleporter might work, kind of like how the headsets for non-unicorns help them carry swords and stuff. Okay, I'll get to work on that. Sparks turned to leave before Slighthoof stomped on his tail to keep him from going anywhere. Sparring first, mad science later. Another pause. I can live with that. Maybe blunt force trauma might bring out some more ideas. Thanks for hearing me out, boss. Sparks freed his tail and trotted into the sparring groups, looking for a partner. Slighthoof sighed and continued his rounds, stopping at the last pair just as Echo knocked her opponent's hooves out from under her. Next time try moving, the blind Justicar said, flicking her clawed boots into a stored position and helping her opponent back up. But how did you dash? The other pony began, only to have Echo silence her. I can hear your heart beating and every movement your sword makes through the air. Not only can I dodge easily, but I never lose track of where you are. Echo smiled. Go get a drink, and we'll continue this later. The other pony nodded before departing. First pest control, now you're giving out your secret. Slighthoof asked, feigning surprise. You hit your head or something on our last mission. I'm in a good mood this week, sir. Echo replied, turning her head in the general direction of Slighthoof. Would you rather I be in a bad mood? It'd be a little closer to normal, that's for certain. Slighthoof noted Echo's frown. And I mean that in the best possible way. Ah, you flatter me. Slighthoof rolled his eyes. Take 5 until your sparring partner returns, he said before beginning to move on. Don't want to fight me? My standard method of cheating doesn't exactly work on you. Echo did not respond, but Slighthoof guessed that she had probably just shrugged and moved on. His round of the sparring sessions complete, Slighthoof returned to his observation point. He would have loved to join in, but that was the problem with being a force commander, you were usually the last one to get any kind of practice, which was not saying much. I'm impressed, a voice said from behind Slighthoof. He turned and saw Princess Luna entering the room, but what really caught his attention was what she was wearing. She was clad in a midnight blue suit of armor, much more intricate and heavily built than any other suit Slighthoof had seen before. Her neck was guarded by 2 large pauldrons, one containing the image of the moon while the other showed an upward-facing crescent behind a wolf's head. Her chest piece was dominated by a silver alicorn, wings spread wide as if preparing to take flight, and a large mace dangled from a clamp on her hip. It has been some time since I have seen soldiers drilling, and yours are much more efficient than some of the forces I have seen. Thank you, Princess, he said, giving a small bow. I'm glad to see you approve. Slighthoof regarded Luna for a moment, going by a minute eye twitch and a slight ripple in her feathers, he could tell that she was slightly nervous. Maybe it has something to do with all that time she's been locked away. Is there something I can help you with? Oh, I was just trying to get a better feel for the military organization of the modern era, that's all. In full battle armor, a pause. I just finished forging this a few hours ago. I felt that I needed to get used to moving around in it before trusting it in combat. Well, we're not exactly at war with anyone, so you'll have lots of time to get used to it. Luna raised an eyebrow. And I mean that in the best possible way. I'm sure you do. Luna looked towards the others. Why are you not participating? Odd number of ponies, and there needs to be some pony observing the troops. Can't you practice at the same time as you observe, or do a rotation with some of your subordinates? Slighthoof had to resist the urge to smack himself in the face. Why didn't I think of that sooner? That's a good point, Princess. He looked into the group. Sparks. Yeah boss, the Justicar called out from his position, where he was pinned beneath a fellow Justicar's forelegs. I'm going to get some practice in, so you take over for observation. Why? You fighting the princess or something? All activity in the room stopped, with every single Night Guard's pony looking up to Luna and Slighthoof. The force commander was at a loss for words. He'd just wanted a simple sparring session, not a fight with a pony who had almost killed Princess Celestia 1,000 years prior. Although, she wasn't exactly Luna then. I wouldn't mind. Luna answered, stepping forward and bringing out her mace. I haven't sparred in some time, and I need to strengthen my telekinesis. She looked to Slighthoof. What say you? Sure, why not? Slighthoof and Luna stepped into the practice arena, the other ponies backing up to give the two some room. This should be interesting to watch. Echo said. You can't watch it anyway. Slighthoof muttered as he got into position. I'll hear you guys well enough. My bet's on the princess. Slighthoof ignored Echo, turning towards Luna and drawing his sword before bringing the weapon up into a guard position. The two stood there for some time, waiting for the other pony to make the first strike. Seizing an opportunity, Luna rushed forward while sweeping her weapon towards Slighthoof. Not even bothering trying to block, Slighthoof rolled out of the way, the mace passing very close to his head. He got back up and swung, and was surprised when Luna nimbly skipped out of the way of his attack. She darted back in, hoping to knock Slighthoof over with her armored bulk, but a quick thrust from his sword forced her to pull back. The ponies surrounding them watched every single strike traded between the two, some taking sides and cheering the combatants on. Is this a normal occurrence when you spar? Luna asked, deflecting another strike. Not particularly, no. Maybe it's you they're cheering. Other than a small blush, Luna made no other remark, instead rushing forward and almost knocking Slighthoof to the ground. He recovered and pulled back into another guard position, Luna slowing up and searching for an opening. As Luna circled, Slighthoof shifted his right leg a little, allowing a small pouch to fall into his hoof. When Luna rushed forward once more, Slighthoof hurled the pouch at her face, sand exploding from the pouch when it connected with Luna. However, the distraction did little to stop Luna's charge, and in his surprise that his trick actually worked, Slighthoof had no time to dodge. Luna collided with Slighthoof at high speed, the two tumbling over one another before coming to a rest near the far wall. Sand? Really? Luna asked once they came to a stop. Something new I wanted to try, he replied. You don't approve? No, I think it's a great idea. Blind your opponent while you go in for the kill. But in a sparring session. My drill sergeant said that the only thing you're trying to achieve in combat is winning. How exactly you achieve that is up for interpretation. But a sparring session? Okay, so I might have overdone it a little. Care for a rematch? Of course. The sparring sessions ended just before sunset. The various Night Guard's ponies broke off in small groups, some going to rest for the following day while others prepared to take the night shift guarding Canterlot. Sparks and Shadetail had disappeared, possibly to do science, leaving Luna alone with Slighthoof, Echo, Midnight Glimmer, and a few other acolytes. I wanted to thank you, Force Commander, Luna said as she gathered up her things. I wanted to thank you for the sparring session. It has been the most enjoyable experience I have had in a long time. If you ever come back, I'm sure the force commander would be more than happy to see you. Echo chirped, drawing a glare from Slight Hoof. While I'd hate to think of what my esteemed colleague could be thinking about, she's got the right idea. If you ever want to talk or spar with one of us, we'll be here. Unless we get called away on a mission. Midnight Glimmer said. I thank you for your hospitality. Luna said, giving a small smile. I admit I did not connect well with some of my soldiers 1,000 years ago. But now I have my chance, and I thank you for it. Slight Hoof gave a small nod of thanks as Luna turned to leave. I would like to speak to all of you soon, just as a chance to get to know you all. Happy to help, ma'am. Luna exited the training room, the others turning back towards each other. As she stepped out into the evening air, Luna noticed that she was smiling, warmth flowing through every joint in her body. You did well, Luna, the voice of Horus whispered. The portal brought Onland and Galas somewhere in the center of the town, near a large tree that also functioned as some kind of building. The seer had to commend the Equestrians for getting innovative with trees, but that was not her main goal. A strong deposit of magic resided here, and if she could tap into it, plenty of information could be revealed. Galas, stand guard and make sure that Napani is able to interrupt me. Onland said before pulling over several runestone from a pouch. How am I supposed to do that? Snipe them from nearby buildings, the ranger asked, a bit of sarcasm lingering in his voice. Onland focused her mind for a moment, chanting a small incantation before a wave of magic swept over Galas. When it had dissipated, the deer now looked like a mint-green unicorn with golden eyes and a two-toned mane, much to the displeasure of Galas. This disguise should make you blend in with the populace, she said before continuing to set up her runes. My ancestors are probably rolling in their graves right now. Galas muttered, seemingly unaware that his voice had risen several octaves because of the illusion. How long will this last? Until I am finished with the rituals. Now quiet, I am trying to concentrate. Onland kneeled and closed her eyes, opening her soul to the Empyrean and skirting its currents in search of signs. At first she found nothing, but soon she began to pick up trace amounts of energy, most emanating from the nearby tree but others coming from further magic deposits. The strongest seemed to be coming from the equestrian city on the mountain, she thought, focusing her attention on those tendrils. I suppose that should be our next stop. Hopefully there will be enough places to hide without Galas having to. Seer. Someone's approaching. Galas whispered, breaking Onland's concentration for a brief instant. Rather than admonish the ranger for his stupidity, she cast a quick cloaking spell over herself to hide from view, a small prayer to the gods running through her mind as she watched Galas. 6 ponies exited the tree, all of them chatting about something Onland could not pick out. The seer could detect strong magical power radiating off the 6, something that piqued her curiosity. Perhaps those 6 have something to do with the lost. I shall have to investigate this at a later time. They did not seem to notice Galas, and if they did they were too focused on their current path to worry about the ranger. As they drifted out of earshot, Onland could hear Galas give a small sigh of relief. Next time, seer, could you disguise me as something less demeaning, like a plant? He asked. Next time find some way to alert me to the pony's presence without breaking my concentration, she snapped, dismissing her illusions and returning Galas to his normal form. What did you want me to do? Write it down on a piece of paper and give it to you to read. You're creative, I'm sure you'll find a way, she sighed. It doesn't matter now, I have the information we need, and now we must move on. Where to? The most dangerous part of Equestria, right beneath their ruler's eyes.